A fellow knitter and I were talking about ways to use Picot hems on loom knitting, and boy did we come up with some fun things for you to play with. I always thought that the little bumps are what made it a Picot, and I think many of us think of it that way. But when I looked it up, Wikipedia defines a Picot as a decorative loop of thread at the edge of the fabric. So we'll try doing one of those too. Each of these begins with E-wrapped pegs, so that's what I will do at the beginning of each one, though I'll only show it to you this once. The E-wrap is the best cast on because it's the easiest to hang later, and we will be doing that. And it also shows the least on the finished fabric on the right side, in my opinion. Then each one of them begins by knitting a few rows, and the number of rows is adjustable. On this sample, with the widest scallops, I knitted the fewest rows. I knitted the bare minimum, and I'm not nuts about it because it flips up. So on the samples that we knit together, I'm going to knit a few more rows. So I'm going to go off camera and set up for our first sample just by knitting, I think, 4 rows. That's kind of a minimum in my mind. Here we are, 4 rows knitted. There's our cast on. I'm going to just omit considering the end stitches because, as you know, they tend to distort everything. So I'm transferring every other stitch to the next peg over, not including the end stitches. All right, now 4 more rows. On the first one, we will wrap the empty pegs, but of course we have nothing to knit over, so we won't. That will make the design. And what we do have is some pegs hold 2 stitches, and we will knit both of those over at the same time. At the same time means in the same step, but it doesn't have to be physically at the same time. This is okay too. If you can lift and knit over both, that's fine. If you can't, the effect is the same. Now 3 more plain normal rows, and I'll be back. Okay, here we go. I knitted, after the cast on, 4 rows, transferred stitches. I've knitted 3 rows thereafter, and at this point, it's always wise to stop and check. What we want is for the points to be at the bottom of the hem, and it looks like I'm there now. And sometimes it's the same number of rows that you knitted after the cast on that should also be knitted after the Picot, but sometimes it's 1 fewer. It depends on a number of things, and one of them is the style of the Picot. So when you're swatching for the project, you kind of have to swatch this also. This would be my swatch, and then I'd be able to make my scarf or my baby dress, knowing that my Picot bumps would fall in the correct place. So we hang our cast on all the way across. And then we'll knit another couple rows and get it off. You saw me have a little bit of trouble just then, and it turned out to be operator error. I had forgotten to hang this end loop, so I was trying to stretch my loops over a peg because of the omission of that one. Made them overly tight. So I corrected the matter off camera, and here we are knitting the row that closes the hem. Because the hem has stockinette facing both directions, it's basically lined whoops, it does not curl. However, if you make it too small, as I did here, it will still curl or flip, one or the other. That's why I said 4 rows is a minimum. And this is worsted weight yarn. I'm sure you've already spotted that I'm working on the Kiss regular gauge loom. With thinner yarns on finer gauges, I would knit more rows, because to some degree, it's a matter of how much distance, not how many rows. You can see it there, but it'll look better once it's off. So I will get it off of the loom and you can have a look. Here it is. And you nearly always need to give it a lengthwise pull to set the stitches so the picots look their best. So that's the simple one. Every other stitch transferred. And here it is on the larger, longer sample. You can see the edge looks the same, but you can get a perspective on it. Now let's work on this one, which is based on a 3-stitch repeat. Again, I have cast on and knit, this time 5 rows, just for variety. We're going to work on these 3 stitches, the next 3, and the following 3. I added a stitch on each end just to give us something that's not involved in the pattern as a border. Let's knit the 3. Then of these 3, let's knit the center one. This is what makes the bump at the edge. And let's do it another time. Knit the 3 again. There are a lot of ways you can vary this. And if you do, keep notes so you know what you did that you liked. You notice last time we didn't knit any extra rows. We just transferred and then went back to knitting normally. This should make a somewhat more pronounced picot. The 3 stitches. Go back to the center one. Knit it. Now for this experiment, I'm going to not just knit the center one twice, but knit it several times, trying to make a longer piece of knitting in the center. And I don't think there's really an upper limit. You can maybe see what's developing here. There we go. We're making a loop of knitting, just as described in the definition in Wikipedia, a decorative loop of knitting at the edge. And I'm just going to be really generous and see how it turns out. I haven't actually done it before. Now it seems to me that it would be best to fasten this by itself by going back to the original stitch that's aligned and hanging it. And what we're getting as a result is popping out here, a little loop. So we'll see how it does. And now I'm going to knit all 3 again and move on to the next batch of 3. Knit the 3. Now for the first group of 3, I only knitted the center stitch twice. So let's do that again. And I can envision going all the way around, say, a little girl's skirt, alternating the bigger loopy picots and the ones that just come to a point. 1, 2, 3. And then this stitch will be knitted normally just as part of the edging. And now you know what's coming. We want to knit enough rows that are picots will end up at the bottom of the work. It may be 4, it may be 5. I'll make a decision when I check and fold them up and let you know how it turned out. Well, that worked really well. 4 rows was the correct way to finish it. When we give this picot a lengthwise pull, those 2 rows we knitted make quite a point, but the multiple rows that we knitted do make a true little loop at the bottom, and you could knit more of them. And I would also encourage you to try cool little things. You could take a fairly large hold bead and put this chain, thread it through the bead, and then put it back on the loom peg, and that would be kind of cute too. So this is the 3-stitch picot. It's more pronounced than the single for several reasons. One of them, we knitted an extra row on just the 3 to bring it down, make more of a scallop. Second thing, it's more stitches. Third thing, even these small points had an extra row knitted on them. And then, of course, we tried another option. So that's the 3-stitch version. Okay, let's do something even a little bit more elaborate. I'm going to leave 2 stitches, just ordinary, on each edge. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's one picot group. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the other. So that's the ordinary stitch. I slipped the first one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Going to the right. We're going to try to make something a bit more prominent. Now, skipping the 5th peg, let's just knit on these 3 center ones. Whoops, I missed a peg, sorry about that. So the ones covered by my left thumb are not part of the pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 we have knitted. We're going to skip this one, knit these 3. 1, 2, 3, going to the left. Now let's just knit the center one. And for a change, let's see what 3 times looks like. Now we have to end up, after this is all done, going back to the right, or I can't knit my others. So even if you lost track, you know what to do. Knit 1, 2, 3 to the left. This time we're not jumping straight back to 5. We're making it more pronounced shaping. Now we'll include all 5. Between my thumbs are the 5 patterning pegs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this particular one, we shaped it from 5 to 3 to 1 at the point, and we did maybe 3 rows of 1, I think. That's what it looks like right now. Now we'll move on and do the same with the other. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm leaving these aside until this picot is finished. So I knitted 3 to the right. Now I'll skip the last one knitted so as just to be able to knit. I said 3 to the right just now. I believe I meant 5 to the right. Now we knit 3 to the left. 1, 2, 3. Now we knit 1 to the right. And now I'm just dying to see if that business of the bead works. I truly don't know, so we'll find out together. Let's knit enough rows that I think I can get the bead on it. I am not being very fussy about how I wrap this for this several stitches, because I have noticed it really doesn't show. So wrap it however you want. Technically, I should be going this way, then this way, then this way, and this way. But it's easier for me to just do E-wraps here, and it's going to roll up and not show. Oops, dropped it. So I'm not worrying about it. If you are a purist and it bothers you, or you see that in the yarn and in the size you're doing, you think there is a difference, there's my little chain of stitches I've just made, then certainly feel free to do what you want. This is a latch needle. This is a tool that goes to a knitting machine. You can actually do it just with the knitting machine needle. And there are small beading tools that are similar, but I don't own one. This is a way to get it through the bead easily. But I think to tidy it up, I'm going to first go down, hang the bottom stitch, the one that's aligned with the other parts of the picot, and then hang this. But I figured out I need to make sure that my bead is behind the fabric. So now I can hang both of these stitches and tighten up. But see, of course, we want it to be on this side. Will it work as far as getting the job done? We'll see if we like the effect. Now I need to knit 3 stitches moving left, and they double checking. These are my 2 non-involved stitches. This would be stitch 5, so I am knitting on 4, 3, 2, which is what I had in mind. Both of these loops will come over together, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I need to move 1 peg to the left to pick up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and now I can knit these non-involved pegs, and this row is complete. I will knit a few plain rows and get this off, and we can all have our look at it. I think you can see that there are just oodles of ways to make this picot look happen. I think that I have the correct number of rows so that when I hang my E-wraps, everything will align at the bottom of the picots properly. An important thing to remember is that you must keep the direction going in the direction that your row is developing. So, let's see, these 2 were not really part of the picot, and I knitted them, 1, 2. Now here comes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3 is our next row. 1 is our next row. We can knit as many rows as we want on 1. It's when we return to the 3-stitch row that we need to make sure we're going in a direction that will allow us to finish with 5 going to the right. That logically means the 3-stitch row has to go right to left. Then I can knit this stitch first, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and move onward. So the only time you have to concentrate hard is the second to last row of the picot. The rest of it's going to be kind of obvious. You go in the direction that you were going, then you go back to shape the picot, then you go to the center stitch. Now's the deciding point. If I'm going to the right, if I'm knitting to the right, I must begin this row to the left. Otherwise, I'll end up on the wrong side. But since I did knit this pretend row going left, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm ready for the second picot. Well, did that work great or what? I've got this tool laying here to cover the 2 stitches on this edge that weren't really part of the action. So you can see how nice and symmetrical this is. This side, same deal, these last 2 stitches were not part of the action. But it definitely did accept the bead and give us a nice accent point at the bottom of the loop, which works just fine. So this is a whole bunch of ideas or ways of using the same idea differently. If you were making a real project, you would need to first know what size picot you hope to use. For example, this basic one is a multiple of 2. And if you're working around the hem of a circular knitted object, then I would need that hem to be a multiple of 2. Just say it's a sock top, and it's a child, and it only needs to be 23 or 24 or 25 stitches. It needs to be 24. Otherwise, you don't have the multiple of 2 that gets your picot working correctly. But if you are at the bottom of a dress and you're using this 5-stitch picot, it needs to be a multiple of 5. If you're seaming or creating a center back opening or something like that, the stitches involved in the seam or the opening or placket would not be part of the picot design. They would be like these, added on separately. So that's something to keep in mind. But we have a lot of fun options to play with.